Well, it is no pucks given here on the Pittsburgh Hockey Now platforms. Hi, I'm Dan Kingerski. We are at the UPMC Lemieux Complex as training camp resumes after the Monday night game in Montreal. The Penguins lose 2-1 shootout, but that really has no bearing on the story at all, does it? That was a really fun game, I think, for me to watch and probably for a lot of you for a lot of different reasons. So this podcast, episode 31 here of No Pucks Given. Two main topics, and how long it goes, I guess, is how long I talk. The first topic we're going to get into, Pittsburgh Hockey Now spent weeks digging into the situation, the land around PPG Paints Arena. The local politicians, the local political class is quite angry. They are making real threats to the Penguins. That includes seizure. The Penguins are facing some deadlines, the first one being October 22nd. We'll get into really all of that, what it really means, and how it could be impacting the sale. As one friend sort of joked with me as they clicked on the story to start reading it, like, oh, this is actually like real journalism, Dan. Yes, I spent weeks talking to everybody that we possibly could, everybody that would talk to us to really get the real story there. The second thing we're going to get into is the high-octane training camp and preseason and how it manifested itself, what you really saw Monday night. We're going to take what we saw Monday and plug it into the bigger picture and take it a step further, extrapolate that on where everything goes from here. Because I thought it really was the first time that door opened where you got to see into the future of the Penguins. And I thought it was really interesting. We're going to get into that. But first, let's talk about the Penguins sale. First thing, I think we're going to have an announcement first few days of October. Gut feeling, I think there have been additional complications because the people who had this story first, the guys, Elliot Friedman, Pierre LeBrun, who were first on this story, expected it done a month ago. So we have to start asking ourselves why. Why hasn't it gotten to that point? Very simply, this is a $1.75 billion business deal. Such things usually don't just go, oh, okay, yeah, give me the team. Here's a check. There's a little bit more to it. I believe, though I do not know, that one of the issues that being worked through or had to be looked at closely is the land deals around the arena. Now, just to catch you up a little bit, for those of you who don't remember back in like 2006 and 7 and all of this insanity that ensued and how close the Penguins were to moving to Kansas City. The negotiations netted the Penguins the opportunity to develop the land around the arena. They don't have an obligation to do so, however. That's maybe an important distinction as we kind of that we'll talk about at the end of this little discussion here. The politicians, the Stadium and Exhibition Authority that actually owns part of the land, has been waiting for more development because they get money from these developments. They make money. The SEA is otherwise responsible for the upkeep, the maintenance, and the little stuff on all three stadiums, PPG, PNC, and Acrisure. Well, Acrisure and PNC are getting to be 25 years old now. Doesn't that make you feel old? The upkeep and the maintenance on those, the costs are climbing. PPG is 15 years old. The costs are going to start climbing here pretty soon. For example, the Penguins asked for $421,000 a few months ago. I think it was back in March or February. It's in the SEA minutes for a new server room. That's just the kind of stuff. So the politicians who serve on the SEA board and otherwise do the work are starting to say, hey, develop the land. At issue, here is, I think, the flashpoint for everything. And we've confirmed this with multiple sources. There is an October 22nd deadline by which the Penguins must begin development on the other parcels of land or forfeit them. Option B is to file an extension where they get 2 years, 2 additional years, at a cost of $126,000 and change per month. I mean, I guess in a $1.75 billion deal, a few million isn't exactly a great deal of money, but it's still an inconvenience, and there's still a time frame. And that's what I'm going to kind of merge those two options into one here. You saw in the story on Pittsburgh Hockey Now. In fact, let me share the screen here for those of you on the video side. And the story was fed up. Old, new Penguins owners face hard deadlines and anger over arena land. Senator Wayne Fontana was quoted as saying, we're fed up. Actually, he was quoted by me because those were one-on-one conversations that we had with multiple sources, and he went on the record with that. He also went on the record openly questioning the reason the Penguins might file an extension. Is it just for the sale, or is it to develop the land? Now, make no mistake, the SEA spoke to Pittsburgh Hockey Now with the intention of conveying the message that indeed, if the Penguins miss that 22nd deadline, they will take back all of the land that hasn't been developed. If they file an extension, and 2 years goes by and there's land not developed, or the development only has to start, by the way. It doesn't have to be finished, just has to start. They will take that land as well. Now, land that has been started remains property of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the FNB Tower, that's Penguins property. The Live Nation concert venue, that's Penguins property, because those developments began obviously long before the deadlines. There's a nice picture of PPG Paints Arena for those of you on the video side. It really does become a little bit of a contentious issue because it's been 15 years. And that entire area has been contentious since they built the Civic Arena 75 years ago or thereabouts. Because what it did, and I don't want to get too deep into it, because it really does become a political battle, and your worldview will shape whichever way you see it. When they built the Civic Arena in the 50s, it cut off the Hill District from downtown. At the time, the Hill District was this vibrant jazz clubs, blues clubs, where the biggest acts in the country would stop over and play a couple of shows. The Ella Fitzgeralds and Dizzy Gillespie's and all of these people on their way from Chicago to New York would stop in Pittsburgh, or Detroit to New York. They would stop in Pittsburgh and they would play. The clubs were in the Hill District. Well, when they built the original arena, that sort of cut off the Hill District from downtown and kind of created a do I say segregated? Segmented. You pick the word. Neighborhood that obviously has not thrived or flourished since then. There are parcels of land on the top side around the arena that are owned by the Urban Redevelopment Authority. They obviously have some issues and demands. Their relationship with the Penguins at best is complicated. We were told of, peace offerings the Penguins tried to make in terms of grants and gifts. So, we will help you build this or help you build that were rejected. And the URA has their own, list of grievances. We want this or we want that. The Penguins haven't come through. To get into that relationship really would become a book, which is why I shied away from it in the story, because I think at issue for Penguins fans is the land, the value of the land, the deadlines, and the seriousness of the SEA and the URA to enforce those deadlines to take back the land. Now, the Hoffman family of companies, who we expect to complete the purchase of the Penguins, like I said, in the first couple of days of October, if not sooner, they do have a commercial and a residential real estate division as part of their $2 billion company. So one would think they know what they're doing in terms of development. One question would be, how much of that do they really want to develop? You see the North Shore. So many of those businesses down there have been changing hands over and over. The Bettis Grill went. I forget the first brewery along the river that went out. Then Voodoo Brewing replaced it. Now Voodoo is out. Remember some of the great bars down there, Mullins and High Tops, that have come and gone over the years. So it's a difficult thing, and there's stage AE. Now they're putting Live Nation around the arena. Is there enough Pittsburgh to support a couple secondary concert venues? Is there enough Pittsburgh to support a commercial and residential development up there? Don't forget, Pittsburgh right now has about a 40% occupancy, not vacancy, occupancy rate. Office buildings are plentiful. Office space is plentiful in downtown Pittsburgh. People really haven't come back since the pandemic. Some have, but it's certainly not 100%. These are all things that a developer would look at. And so I do know that affordable housing is part of the URA's request on some of that land around the arena. Will the Penguins follow through on that? Should they follow through on that? These are all questions that very much could affect the price of the Penguins. I mean, after all, if, let's just assume that FSG does apply for the extension before the October 22nd deadline, which would seem to be a foregone conclusion. It's approved and all of that. Now, I have been told if they apply for the extension, there could be some public comment, which might get interesting. But let's just assume that they apply for the extension, they get past the October 22nd deadline. Now the Hoffman family of companies has a very finite and short window to begin development. 2 years is enough time to begin one or two developments, but several? That becomes a cannonball run, so to speak, of a lot of work to do, a long way to go, and a short time to get there. I don't know if they could. And so they have to be thinking in their mind, okay, if we lose tracks X, Y, and Z of land, how much is the team really worth then? Because the Penguins will retain ownership of Live Nation because that development started. They will retain ownership of the FNB parcel where the tower is because that development has been completed. But anything not completed, they lose in a couple of years. So how much does that affect the value? Because the land itself probably isn't worth tens of millions of dollars. But fully developed, now it is worth. One of our sources put the value at all of the parcels of land developed as the city envisioned in the hundreds of millions. Okay, that seemed to be fair to me. I can neither confirm nor deny the accuracy of it, but it seems fair. Would the Hoffman family of companies pay full boat if they could lose a few $100 million of that value? Would they pay full boat if somebody else can develop that land right next door and perhaps put some things they don't want there? Perhaps put some businesses that compete with businesses they're going to put there. These are all major league issues. These are all things that if you're going to spend a couple $1 billion, well, you probably think about. And I suspect this is part of the longevity. This is part of all of the discussions and processes. We've tried to reach the Hoffman family of companies to no avail, no response from there. FSG has kind of closed the door as well. We did get a statement from the Penguins for our story on Sunday. We got a statement. That was the same one they'd given to the Post-Gazette a couple of weeks ago and to the Pittsburgh Business Times. So I can't say we broke new ground with the Penguins. We did break new ground, I think, in bringing the focus onto the specifics and how it affects hockey. Okay, so I'm going to tell you personally what I think is going to happen. I think some of the land will be developed. I think some of the land should be developed. I understand the city's frustration, but ultimately, I don't think all of it gets developed because of the profit motive. I don't think there is profit in developing all of that land. I just don't. And that's probably disappointing to, be disappointing to the URA, which would very much like to see all of it developed and the Hill District undergo the revitalization that we've seen Garfield and Lawrenceville, and especially East Liberty undergo in the last 10 years. When I first moved to the city, would have been 2011. I lived in a $550 apartment in East Liberty. No joke. Near the Obama Academy, Alpha Historic District. Loved my little one bedroom. I moved out a year later when my son came to live with me full time, and he went to Alderdice High School. We moved over to Shadyside and all of that. But that apartment, no kidding, 18 months later, that apartment was going for $1,250. No upgrades. That's just, and I'm sure it's probably $2,000 a month now over there. Unfortunately, the Hill hasn't undergone that renovation and that revitalization. And I'm sure they're looking at the arena and the arena district as the conduit to rebuild. And I don't know how the two sides bridge that gap. I do think some of it will get developed to the SEA's satisfaction, because the SEA owns the lower part, and that kind of connects right into downtown. I think it would behoove any Penguins owners. I used to love to go to the Super Bowl after the game. It's never open anymore. Like there's just not enough business right there. So I think some highway, some infrastructure, but also some commerce would go a long way around the arena. Okay. For those of you on the video side, hang on. For those of you on the podcast, on the audio side, we're going to take a quick break as Odyssey helps us pay some bills. So we'll take a break right now.